And right now, I would like to introduce Mr. Jan Ceyssens, Head of Digital Finance Unit in DG FISMA, to present the outlook of the future of European digital finance and new European Commission initiatives. Do we have Jan on the line right now? And we can start.
There you go. So thank you very much to everybody, and good morning, dear Minister, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for actually setting up this excellent event. And in spite of a couple of, let's say, technical issues, I think we can do this very, very well. So I will try to give you an overview today, this morning, about, let's say, the Commission's suggestions and approach we are having indeed to digital finance and fintech. And I'm very excited and very delighted to hear many colleagues, many comments actually from Vilnius and from Lithuania on those matters. So I will start off with the background actually of our actions, our activities. Making Europe fit for the digital age is a key priority for the new European Commission, the Commission of Mrs. von der Leyen. We have, and indeed the COVID-19 situation we see now is a big accelerator actually of the digital development. So that of course also makes those matters even more important. Now, technology and digitalization is not an end in itself. They are supporting, and they need to support our European visions and goals. A technology that needs to work for the people, a fair and competitive economy, open, democratic and sustainable societies, and also Europe as a global player. Digital age and finance particularly, what I said before is true of course for all areas, but particularly in finance we see many opportunities for everyone actually. New payment and personal finance for citizens, more efficient insurance claim services for drivers, more targeted advice for retail investors, better access to finance for SMEs. That is particularly important in the current COVID-19 situation, as the economy has been under lockdown in many countries, and other matters. But of course, risks also need to be kept in check. Financial products also always incur risks, and the digital environment adds additional risks to them, so those need to be kept in check as well. In any event, we are convinced, and that's what we hear also from all the stakeholders across all member states, the digital age, if anything, will be European and global. The digital economy does not stop at the border, and scale is actually key. And within Europe, indeed, the only way to achieve scale is actually to act together within the internal market, to act together with all member states. We are not starting from scratch, and we are actually in a quite very good position in Europe. We in our financial sector are actually among the global leaders in financial technology, and I think Lithuania is one of the countries where this is which are particularly strong in this area. So I think the combination we have of more established financial centers and new innovative ones, and more established financial players and new innovative ones, is actually a very good starting point. And it is interesting to see that the fintech sector, I think among all venture capital sectors in Europe, attracts the highest amount of venture capital funding. And indeed, if you compare the numbers and the funds which are flowing to this sector compared to other tech sectors, actually, and compared to other jurisdictions, other countries, Europe is actually in a quite good spot. So especially in the digital age and finance, Europe has a good starting point actually to make a lot out of that. Now, where do we start from the European Commission? We are not working on fintech only since yesterday. We had adopted an action plan on fintech in 2018 that has now been fully implemented. And most recently, end of last year, we actually agreed common rules and a single passport also for Europe on crowdfunding. That is one additional step, I think, to leverage the potential. It is also true that, however, in the past years, new challenges have arisen, and we recently received advice from a group of experts in a report on regulatory obstacles to financial innovation, which informed us about the possible obstacles and the issues we still need to address at the European level. So on that basis, on the basis of the action which we already did and the new challenges which have been reported to us, Executive Vice President Dombrovskis, who is leading this work in the Commission and who has a strong interest indeed in fintech and digital finance, will put forward a new fintech strategy to support new digital technologies in our financial system. And we will do this as soon as autumn, September this year. Now, fintech does not act in isolation, and finance doesn't act in isolation. Actually, you can argue that the digital age doesn't know such things as the financial sector or the e-commerce sectors or others. There are more and more interplays. So that's also how we see this work very much from the European Commission. What we do on finance has a strong connection, and we want to leverage indeed on the broader picture. In February, the Commission published a white paper on artificial intelligence, a European data strategy. We are working on e-identities, e-IDAS, and we are having plans for Digital Services Act, which should come very soon. So all those things are highly relevant for the financial sector as well, and we want to make sure that indeed they can work in the financial sector, and we, on the other hand, address also the specific needs and issues arising in finance. So now what we are doing right now is indeed we have a consultation ongoing to ask really what should be the EU's priorities for the next 4 or 5 years on digital finance. I think it is our objective to make sure that the EU remains among the leading jurisdictions in the digital development of the financial sector, while also addressing related risks. We want to support key EU financial services policies, for example, the Capital Markets Union, sustainable finance, also a strong international role of the euro. It's clear that from our side, we need to work across different files and sectors, and very much across different policy areas. And we want to really base ourselves on broad and upfront stakeholder consultation and outreach. And today's event is one of the examples and one of the outreach parts of that. So on our side, we really want to hear from the digital key in the digital age, and certainly in digital finance. We know that there are many good rules in place across Europe. We have the passport, where you register in one country and then you can act across the border. But we also know that there are still many obstacles to implementing this in practice. And so we want to understand what are the issues we still need to tackle. One example is the supervisory coordination in the European Forum of Innovation Facilitators. We have otherwise other examples on the regulatory divergences which still exist in many areas. I think digital e-identities, e-identification is certainly one good example on which we've already heard a lot. So we want to hear what are the key obstacles which we still need to address to enable firms to scale up. I think the second broad area of work is to understand where we should adapt our regulation to make it indeed technology neutral and enable innovation. You know, the European single rulebook or the European rules are quite important in finance, but we are aware that they're not always fully adapted to all, let's say, technological developments. So one example, and I will maybe dwell on that a bit, is our plans to create a framework for markets in crypto assets. So we had already launched a consultation on that. We are basing ourselves on advice received by the supervisory authorities. And we want to actually, in that sense, create a European regulatory framework for crypto assets. We are looking both at those assets which are already covered today by legislation and those which are outside. So we want to have a broad scope covering many different asset classes, and of course a proportionate approach commensurate to risk. So where there are few risks, you don't have to regulate very heavily, but when projects become large and systemic, of course you need to have a much closer eye. So this is the second area, the technology neutrality. The third area of our work is indeed how we can promote a data-driven financial sector in the EU. Data is one of the key drivers and inputs indeed in innovative products in finance. We are with the European side actually in a quite good spot on that. You know, the PSD2 payment services have put us also globally at a regulatory forefront. So we want to understand and explore how we can further develop this area. I think another example is to look at the numerous disclosures which financial firms need to make these days. But sometimes these disclosures are made in a PDF format or in paper format even. So they're not really don't really include very accessible data. That's something we should also see how we can make this kind of data more accessible also for tech projects. And the fourth area I mentioned, digital finance has many opportunities, but it also carries risks. And I think digital operational risk and cyber risks are one of them, key ones. So the fourth area of reflection is what we can do to enhance the digital operational resilience of the European financial system. So in that sense here as well, and I'll move to the next slide there, we are working on a legislative framework which should set up a common European regulatory framework for digital operational resilience to make sure that all participants in the financial sector are actually having basic cyber hygiene standards in place, because we know in the financial sector this is highly interconnected. So the low standards in one entity, in one market participant, have spillover effects to many others. Again, I think we can build on positive areas. The PSD2 has quite good standards in place. Other parts of our work as well, and we have the cross-sectoral Network Information Security Directive. So we want to build on that and establish indeed a comprehensive and harmonized framework. And this will indeed also include particular rules on the use of third-party providers, so cloud service operators and other matters. So those are the four areas on which we are reflecting. As I mentioned, we want to put this together in autumn to a comprehensive digital finance strategy for Europe, which would set out what would be the most important priorities for the next 4 or 5 years. But before doing that, indeed, right now we really are reaching out. We really want to hear from the various fintech sectors, the various financial sectors in the member states. What do you think about those things? Where is it that Europe can actually provide added value and help this sector develop, and ultimately, indeed, also provide added value and better products for consumers and businesses? And that is, I think, right now the key challenge in the current, as we are slowly emerging from the COVID-19 situation. The digital finance has a lot of potential, but now we need to take the actions to make sure that it is leveraged. Thank you very much for your attention, and I thank you very much to the Minister and to all stakeholders in Vilnius already for organizing this event. And I'm looking forward to further discussion and exchange with you.
And Jan, thank you very much for your time and your patience, and for a very interesting keynote presentation.